keyword little.
Live.
All right, Mr. Mayor, we are live. Alfredo, can you confirm it still says you are in practice session on my screen?
Started the meeting.
We are not live. Hold on a sec.
It says webinar has started on the screen.
The host has started.
All right, Mr. Mayor, we are now live.
Perfect. Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the May 16, 2023 City Council Special Hybrid Meeting. I'm Mayor Salim Neese. This evening's hybrid City Council meeting is being brought to you by Zoom. We're also broadcasting live on MITV Channel 21 and on the city's YouTube channel. Welcome to all and thanks for joining us tonight. Council members, please have your microphones turned on for the roll call. City Clerk Andrea Larson, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Andral.
Here.
Councilmember Jacobson.
Here.
Councilmember Reynolds.
Here.
Councilmember Weicker.
Here.
Councilmember Weinberg.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Here.
And Mayor Neese.
Here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And next we have the Pledge of Allegiance. Council, please mute and turn off your video to ensure the flag is visible and join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we now move to approval of tonight's agenda. If there's no questions, may I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Weinberg, seconded by Councilmember Reynolds. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Sorry, button flailing. Mayor Neese.
Aye.
Councilmember Andral.
Aye.
Councilmember Jacobson.
Aye.
Councilmember Weinberg.
Aye.
Councilmember Reynolds.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Aye.
And Councilmember Weicker.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Motion passes and the agenda is approved. Next up, we have City Manager's report, for which we'll welcome Jesse Bond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Amanda is going to start screen sharing for me while she's pulling up the PowerPoint. I did want to just mention that we had a temporarily lost connection while you were doing the Pledge of Allegiance, and we were not able to display the image of the flag. I do apologize for that. Our IT person is back connected, so we may keep going. Next slide, please. Council, let me start tonight with an update on the City Hall closure. We have not pushed anything out to our community recently in the last couple days, but I will share tonight and then we'll have a communication going out this week. As you're aware, City Hall is temporarily closed. We discovered several weeks ago disturbed tiles and materials were present in our boiler room at City Hall, which is in the basement, and those tiles were later confirmed to contain asbestos. The boiler room includes air handling equipment, basically one of our 2 air handling units for all of City Hall. Because of that, we closed down City Hall. Since that time, we have done a subsequent round of testing, and the tests were recently performed inside the ducts of the HVAC system, and asbestos was detected in settled dust samples at 3 locations. The asbestos detected is above background levels, which means that we will have to act on it to remove it or abate it. We had tested about 29 locations, so 3 came back positive in the HVAC system. We are, as I'm reporting to you tonight, we are in progress with testing. We don't have all of our tests back, but we're working through that. We also had traces of asbestos detected in 2 HVAC filters. Important for the community to know, certainly my staff team to know, and all of you to know that the concentrations of asbestos were low, but again, it's actionable, meaning that we have to do additional testing. We're still working to determine the limits of the asbestos in the building. And we also need to modify our abatement plan now to include the HVAC system. Next slide, please. So what this means for us operating our City Hall and all of you and our community is that City Hall will likely remain closed at least through the summer and possibly a little bit longer. I don't have a definitive timeline yet because we are doing further testing and again trying to determine the limits of the asbestos in the building and the HVAC system. Also, just so we can understand what this work will entail as we go forward, the types of HVAC ducts we have at City Hall, which include mixed fiberglass and metal, and even some of the accordion style ducts cannot be abated by cleaning. They will have to be fully removed and replaced. As you're thinking about what this looks like, as I have been, that means additional time and expense. And we really need to look at all the alternatives before we confirm a path to resolve the situation. We have staff relocated, people that typically work at City Hall in, kind of literally squirreled away in every open space in any city building we have. So we have our police department at the community center. We have our court staff working out of a conference room at Fire Station 91. We have several team members at Luther Burbank, and many of our staff have returned to working fully remote. Now that we know City Hall is going to be closed for longer than the month of May, unfortunately, one of my top priorities is coming up with a plan for municipal court to operate. They have not been able to, even though the staff are working, they have not been able to hold court since we've been closed. So we're looking at those scenarios. We also have some operational needs for the police department that we will need to address, in the near term, medium term. So those are my top priorities. Meanwhile, the testing that I've just described will be ongoing. The next time I'm in front of you will be June 6th, and I anticipate having another round of test results and possibly a little more information about the abatement plan. So that is our update. We're working through it, and for the community, this is looking to be a longer closure than we originally anticipated. So thank you everyone for your patience. If there's we're pretty functional remotely because we did this for a couple years with COVID, but certainly if there are ways we can better engage, I invite you to reach out to me and we would be happy to address that. Council, obviously, as all of you know, the City Hall closure has impacted our council meetings. In fact, for anyone joining us remote right now, we are all on Zoom. A handful of us are here at the community center, which is our open facility. But looking forward to June and July, we are planning for all council meetings to be on Zoom. So council members will be participating via Zoom. All of our board and commission meetings will also remain on Zoom. We just had one board that was back in person. That was the Planning Commission, but they will be returning to Zoom. To meet public noticing requirements for open public meetings, we do have to provide a facility for anyone that would like to join and watch the meeting or provide public comment. That facility will continue to be the room I'm sitting in here at the community center. So that is the landscape, what's happening. We've kept all of our meeting information updated on our website, and the information, if it hasn't been changed yet, it will be changed today to reflect the future Zoom meetings over the next couple months. Go ahead, Amanda. All right, moving on to a different topic than City Hall. This is just a reminder that this is candidate filing week. Goes through Friday at 4:30 p.m. Excuse me, I'm not sure on the time. It goes through May 15th to May 19th, and then the deadline to withdraw is May 22nd at 4:30 p.m. As a reminder, all candidates for public office, including city council, are required to file a county declaration of candidacy, meet the qualifications for the office at the time of filing, and be registered to vote in the district. Also, a look ahead, June 8th, the city will host a council candidate orientation. So for everyone that has filed to run for city council, that will likely be, that was intended to be an in-person meeting. It's looking like it will most likely be Zoom. But again, save the date for June 8th. If you are interested in learning more about running for city council, we do have a website and information available for you at the link on the bottom of the screen. Okay, council, another heads up item for you. I've shared via email, and we've certainly had a lot of communication going out about this over the last week. This weekend, the Washington State Department of Transportation, WashDOT, is going to be performing maintenance work on the flyover ramp from Bellevue Way. So if you're traveling south on Bellevue Way, I know I don't often go this direction because I'm usually headed back to Mercer Island, but the flyover ramp takes you to either I-90 or 405. That flyover ramp will be closed for maintenance beginning on Friday at 10 o'clock p.m. and it will reopen. It's anticipated to reopen at 5 a.m. on Monday. I know we fielded some questions, why can't this work just be done overnight so that it can remain open during the day? It's because the type of work they're doing is concrete work on the decks. And so they need full 24-hour cycles to do the concrete work, let it cure, and then reopen. We also know that the HOV lane connecting Bellevue Way to westbound I-90 will also be closed. So what does this mean for Mercer Island? We have been working with WashDOT and Washington State Patrol for several weeks now, planning for this closure. Most of the traffic, we're hoping, will be caught on Bellevue Way Southeast and redirected to 405. For the vehicles that don't take that detour route, they will then get onto I-90, travel west, take the East Mercer Way exit on Mercer Island, and turn around and head back east. A lot of planning has gone into this. Even saying that, I know that this will cause congestion and traffic impacts, so we've been working really hard with WashDOT, the City of Bellevue, and all of our other partners to let them know about this. We are supported by, I should say, the WashDOT project is supported by Washington State Patrol. They will have deputies on at the East Mercer Way, both the entrance and the exit to I-90 at East Mercer Way to help direct traffic. And that will be during peak travel times, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. It's Tuesday now. This closure is coming up Friday night. You'll continue to see high-level messaging coming out from the city about this closure. Let's see, what else can I share? Again, I think I've covered this slide already. We are anticipating continued communication on this. We do anticipate impacts. And while this is an inconvenience, we also understand the need to get this work done. And we do appreciate WashDOT's cooperation when we asked for the date to be changed. This work was originally anticipated to happen a couple weeks ago. All right, thank you, Amanda. Next slide, please. Also, heads up, more work coming, not surprising to all of you, Council. We also have quite a bit of our own transportation work happening this time of year. So this is a heads up. There's some closures anticipated May 23rd, May 24th, both nightly closures. Northbound and southbound I-405 ramps to eastbound I-90 will be closed, and another closure on May 31st. As we get closer to those dates, we'll continue to message the community so that you have awareness. This is particularly challenging for us right now because we have Sound Transit construction happening on Mercer Island, and we also have King County sewer work happening. And so we are anticipating our exits and entrances to I-90 are going to become quite congested this weekend. We encourage everyone to consider alternatives and certainly to bring their patients and travel early in the morning versus the peak travel hours of 10 to 6. Okay, next slide, please. Just a couple of quick updates for you. The bike skills area at Island Crest Park is progressing. Work on the new bike skills area. We are working on permitting, getting our volunteer work opportunities organized, and preparing our site ahead of construction. We're anticipating the construction project to start in August with an opening date of fall. I can't be more specific than that right now. But we are anticipating opening the bike skills area to the public in the fall. Please know, though, that we'll be doing some additional restoration work and plantings into the winter season and next spring. Heads up on a few things that are coming up. It is summer. It really feels like summer this week. The Mercer Island Farmers Market kicks off again Sunday, June 4th, and it will run all through the summer into September. If anyone's listening in and not familiar with the location of our farmers market, it's located just adjacent to Mercerdale Park, and it runs Sundays from 10 to 3. Summer celebration, you'll see this slide every time I'm in front of you between now and July 15th. We are super happy to be hosting summer celebration again. Also excited that the community parade is back. We'll have lots of activities all day Saturday, July 15th, concluding with our traditional fireworks show and food trucks and lots of fun at Luther Burbank Park that evening. We encourage you to come out, get involved. We have vendor booth opportunities, we have parade opportunities, we have sponsorship opportunities. All that information is available on our website and the link is there on the screen. All right, one more slide and then I'll call it a wrap. Some good news. Council, you know, when we're hiring both firefighters and officers into the police department, there's a long lead time to go through the academy. So, or I should say academies, respectfully. It's always exciting once we clear that hurdle. And I'm pleased to welcome our two newest probationary firefighters, Mason Jones and Josh McCarthy. They graduated last Friday. They took the oath of office. They received certificates and their badges. And while they were part of the ceremony is demonstrating everything that they've learned while they've been training over the last 15 weeks. So we are pleased to welcome them to our team. And I believe this makes us very close to fully staffed now. That is what I have for you this evening. Thank you, City Council.
Thank you. All right, our next item of business is appearances. This is an opportunity for anyone to speak to the City Council on any item. City Clerk, is anybody signed up for appearance tonight?
Yes, there were two people who signed up to speak tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, tonight's agenda will include in-person public appearances and remote public appearances via Zoom. Individuals wishing to address the council may do so in person or by Zoom or telephone, provided they registered with the City Clerk by 4 p.m. today. When it's your turn to speak, you'll be called by name. Remarks must be addressed to the council as a whole and not to individual council or staff members. Please speak audibly and state your name and city of residence for the record. There'll be a timer on the screen. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. And when your time is ended, I'll thank you for your comments and move to the next item, next speaker or item of business. Please call the first speaker.
Our first speaker tonight is Audrey Kovner.
Okay, I'm multitasking because I'm teaching a class at UW at the same time, and I told them I had to run out real quick. I think they're about to leave the room though, so it might get noisy. So good evening, Mayor Neese and Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum and City Council members. This is going to be short. My name is Audrey Kovner and I live on Mercer Island. I'm a past president of Herzl near Meade and the current chair of the Strategic Planning Committee. I'm here tonight to talk in support of the HNT request to add schools to the approved list of building options for Zone B property. So just to provide a little context, HNT purchased the property in 1989 to ensure that whatever was built there would be consistent with our uses. And over the years, we've looked at various options for the property, focusing on our own building and our own economic needs. And about 2 years ago, we started talking with a private Jewish school about sharing the property, an arrangement which would provide us with classrooms for our religious school, as well as financial support for our operations. And to enable this partnership to go forward, we applied for this code amendment to request that a B zone code be amended to add schools to the current list of accepted buildings. Earlier this year, the Planning Commission reviewed our requests, and although they believed a school would be a good use of the property, they asked the Planning Department to add some building parameters since there were no restrictions on a B zone property development. So Anjali Grant, our architect, who's going to speak next, worked very closely with Allison Van Gorp to develop standards that would meet the Planning Commission requests, yet still allow us to build a school. And the Planning Commission ultimately approved those standards, which are now before you in the agenda today. So although these new restrictions were not part of our original request, we are willing to accept this compromise as it still allows us to achieve our goal of building a school. And we want to thank the Planning Commission and the Planning Department, particularly Ms. Van Gorp, for working with us to come up with a solution that could work. So therefore, I'm hoping that you will all vote yes and approve the amendment as proposed by the Planning Commission. And we will be available as we get to the agenda item if you have any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Anjali Grant.
Good evening, City Council. My name is Anjali Grant. I'm an architect in Seattle, and I'm working with Hersel Ner Tamid to explore options for their property. As Audrey mentioned, the synagogue purchased a parcel of commercially zoned land adjacent to their property in order to protect and preserve the residential character of the neighborhood. Herzl would like to be able to develop that parcel in a way that's consistent with the values and character of their institution and compatible with the residential character of the school. Under current zoning laws, schools are not a permitted use in this zone. Our position has always been that a school use is no more impactful than many of the uses that are currently allowed. Permitted uses include preschools, theaters, restaurants, retail, group housing, and museums. The amendment before you adds consistency and fairness to the municipal code and brings it into better alignment with the Mercer Island Comprehensive Plan. I'd like to thank Deputy Community Planning and Development Director Allison Van Gorp and the entire Planning Commission for recognizing the inconsistencies in the Legacy Code and working with us to craft an amendment that is in keeping with the intent of the Mercer Island Comp Plan and will work well for all three of the small areas affected by the change. We support this amendment and ask the Council to vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you. City Clerk, are there any additional speakers?
There are no further speakers tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we now move to our next item of business, which is approval of the consent agenda. The consent agenda contains AB 6266, May 5, 2023 payroll certification, certification of claims for April 28 and May 5, 2023, City Council meeting minutes of April 25 special hybrid meeting and May 2nd special hybrid meeting, AB 6267 public display of firework permit issuance, AB 6268 Luther Burbank Park Docks and Waterfront Art in Public Places project, AB 6271 Safe Boating and Paddling Week proclamation number 309. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Jacobson, seconded by Councilmember Weinberg. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Weinberg,
Aye.
Councilmember Reynolds,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum,
Aye.
Councilmember Weicker,
Aye.
Councilmember Androl,
Aye.
Mayor Neese,
All right,
and Councilmember Jacobson.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
thank you. Motion passes. Our first item of regular business is AB 6270 Development Code Amendment Business Zone Permitted Uses, first reading of ordinance number 23C08, for which we will welcome CPD Director Jeff Thomas.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon to all. You've already had a robust introduction to this subject tonight through public comment. I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce Allison Van Gorp, Deputy Director of Community Planning and Development, as well as Mike Murphy, Vice Chair of the Planning Commission, who joins us tonight. Allison's going to walk you through a short slide deck that will recap the matter and also discuss the Planning Commission's work on this. And then Vice Chair Murphy, I believe, will provide some color commentary from the Planning Commission's perspective. And then we'll be able to have some discussion with the council during first reading of this matter. So Allison, take it away.
Thank you. Just give me 1 second to share my screen.
Just real briefly, Councilmember Jacobson, you have your hand up. Is there something I can help you? Oh, you're on mute there, Jake.
No. I'm trying to lower it, but I'm having a little difficulty because
Very good. I will ignore that. Thank you, Allison.
That is not what I want. There we go. Okay, just to start off with a little background, this item was submitted for the docket back in 2021 by Herzl Nair to Mead, and the council did add it to the docket that December. It was the 2022 docket, and based on like the workload of items that were docketed that year, it was acknowledged at that time that this item was kind of in the queue and we may not get to it in 2022. And in fact, we did not start reviewing this item until earlier this year. The actual docket proposal was to amend MICC 1904-050 to add public and private schools as a permitted use. And by adding this item to the docket, it does not require the city to amend the code as proposed, simply that will conduct the legislative review. A little more background on this code section 1904-050. It establishes the permitted uses and development regulations for the business zone. It permits a variety of commercial uses, including retail, restaurants, hotels, museums, and service stations, among other things. It also permits preschools and daycares, but not K through 12 schools. There's currently 3 small areas that are contained in the business zone. Got a couple photos here just to give you an idea of what's there currently. The 2 properties that are at the edges of town center are already developed. One has the building that contains Sean's Bagels, and then the other is a office building that's up on the hill, kind of above Island Crest Way. This is the photo of the Herzl property, which is undeveloped. Now, a little more information on the Herzl property and that's eastern B zone. The Herzl property is made up of 4 parcels. One of them in this upper left corner is zoned business. 3 of the parcels are split zoned with B and R 9.6. There's one long skinny parcel here, there's a parcel here, and then there's one here that's primarily the parking area. Those split zone parcels are deemed to be located in the R 9.6 zone by the provisions of our code, which means they're treated as if they were in the 9.6 zone. And surrounding uses include other residential areas as well as a commercial office area to the west. The legislative review process, as I've said, this was docketed back in December of 2021. In February of this year, we began the initial review of the proposal, and we got our initial input from the Planning Commission on a draft code amendment. In March, it went to the Planning Commission public hearing, and the commission made a recommendation on that same night. We did the environmental review and notification of the state departments in April, and now we're here for the city council review. Okay, so I'm going to give a quick overview of the recommendation from the Planning Commission. I've broken it out on a few slides. I think there's 4 slides here. So in general, the recommendation would permit schools in the business zone with additional development standards that are intended to mitigate the potential impacts of this use on surrounding neighborhoods. So it adds this use to the list of permitted uses in the zone. Public or private schools accredited or approved by the state for compulsory school attendance, subject to design review as specified in MICC 1912-010. These are a set of design standards, and it requires design review for all non-residential uses outside the town center. And then there's a set of setbacks, 35 feet from property lines that abut single-family zones, 30 feet from public rights-of-way, and 15 feet from public parks. And finally, setbacks are not required on internal property lines. I'll come back to this internal property line issue at the end and talk about that a little more, because we did have some public comments come in the last week or so about that. Next is screening. So there's a requirement for screening along the external property lines, 10 feet wide, partial visual barrier, and it shall be composed of trees, bushes, and ground cover that produces an 8-foot tall visual barrier in all seasons within 3 years of planting. Also, a minimum of 1 tree for every 20 feet of perimeter. And again, internal property lines are excluded from this requirement. The final piece of this is a play field. Most of the other zones in the city that allow schools require this 1/4 acre play field. It's a play field, a play surface, or an open space that's all in one usable unit, and it can be located on an adjacent lot. This is almost identical, very, very similar to the provisions that are in other zones. So coming back to the internal lot lines, what those are boundaries between parcels that are held in common ownership. So using the Herzl property as an example here, I've kind of blown it up and included the aerial photo. There's the 4 parcels I described earlier. These lot lines that are in between the parcels are the internal lot lines. So they're in between the parcels that are held in a common ownership. And I wanted to call out the size of this business zone parcel. It's about 300 feet wide by 100 feet tall. So if you were to apply, say, a 35-foot setback around the size of a property, it would significantly limit what could be built there. For example, if 35-foot setbacks were applied to both of these internal lot lines, that would take 70 feet away from the 110 feet, which only leaves about 40 feet, like a little 40-foot strip here that could be built on. And so I'm not sure if that's developable at all. Probably not as a school, I would think. So that was something that the Planning Commission considered based on some of the public comments we received from the Herzl folks about how the setbacks might affect the plans that they had. Another consideration is some of the language was about a setback from a residential property, a budding residential property. So as I said in the beginning, these other split zoned parcels are considered to be residentially zoned. They're deemed to be located in that zone. So this parcel does in fact abut residentially zoned properties, even though this business zone is directly adjacent to the property lines. That's all I have for my presentation. I wanted to reintroduce Mike Murphy and give him a chance to say a few words about the Planning Commission's discussion and rationale for this recommendation.
Welcome, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. I don't have much to add. Allison has covered it very well. The speakers also covered it very well. I will mention a couple things. There was some question initially about why do we even have this B zone? It's a little bit of an anomaly, but it's there, and the scope of our role was to address the proposed addition to the permitted uses. And so we focused on that task and did not address the issue of whether there should be something done about the B zone as a threshold issue. It was not in our portfolio. The main concerns that members of the Planning Commission had were ensuring appropriate buffers and setbacks for the surrounding properties, but ensuring that those buffers and setbacks did not apply arbitrarily to internal lot lines, which did not make much sense to the members of the Planning Commission. So we made sure that that was factored in. Because, as Allison has pointed out, to apply those buffers and setbacks to the internal lot lines would essentially destroy the utility of the B zone parcel that is part of the assemblage there. There was also interest expressed or desire to make the process subject to a conditional use permit, arguing by analogy to the residential zones. But if you look at what's being done here as an amendment to the permitted uses, And so the issue is not really whether it should be a conditional use or not. It would make no sense to have a less intensive use such as a school be subject to a conditional use permit process when other more intensive uses as described by Allison are allowed outright. So we did not feel that that was an appropriate process to be added on to here. And that's pretty much sums it up. We think this is an excellent approach. We believe it protects the neighboring properties and does not add procedure that is unnecessary to this parcel or to any of the B parcels for that matter.
Okay. Thank you, Vice Chair. Council, to facilitate that handoff from the Planning Commission to us, does anybody have any questions for Vice Chair Murphy before we excuse him? Not seeing any. Oh, sorry, Councilmember Reynolds.
And before you jump in, Allison, can I ask you to stop screen sharing, please?
I did have one more slide I wanted to come back to either now or after the questions in terms of our options for next steps.
Okay, well, let's see the slide and then we'll turn to questions.
Right. Okay, so just to lay it out, we've got three options in terms of how this could move forward. Either the planning committee or the city council can accept the planning commission recommendation as is and set the second reading for June 6th. You could modify the PC recommendation and move it forward to second reading, or you could decline to do a second reading and take no further action on this item. All right, that's it. I'll stop sharing.
Very good. Thank you for that. Thank you, Vice Chair. Councilmember Reynolds.
Yes. Could we come back to the internal lot line issue just for a moment? I want to make sure I understand this. And I'm not sure if this is a question for Mr. Murphy or Ms. Van Gorp, but I think I understand the motivation for wanting to exempt the internal lot lines, and it makes a lot of sense. But practically speaking, how does that work in real life? If, for example, they were to build right up to the property border and then sell the property, sell one of the two pieces of property to somebody else, or maybe sell both pieces, then do we end up with essentially non-conforming structures at that point? And what are the implications of that?
Yeah, maybe I'll just jump in here quickly. This particular situation is a little bit more complex than the simple act of just deciding to sell one of the properties because of the fact there's going to be parking requirements that will be hosted with at least one of the other properties under common ownership, as well as what Allison pointed out in her presentation. There'll be a playground that will also be hosted by one of the other properties. So it seems like a simple question on the surface. Hey, what if they sell one of their properties? But the properties will be codependent to an extent on one another to function with the use that has been requested here through the docketing process, and that's been in legislative review.
So if I may, a quick follow-up, does that mean effectively, are you telling me they would not be able to sell one because that would?
Well, they might be able to sell one or more of them, but then whether the use will be able to continue to subsist into the future is an entirely new question then.
And what's the answer to that question?
Well, if you don't have any parking, you don't have a playground, you can't meet the core requirements of the use, then it would certainly appear on the surface, but again, it may be a deeper question that would require further examination, but it would be difficult to maintain the use.
Okay, I have another question, but I'll wait my turn. Keep my hand up though.
Okay, if you could lower it and then raise it again, I'll put you back in order. Councilmember Jacobson.
At the appropriate time, I have a motion on this as to this AB.
Okay. Let's hear your motion.
I move to direct the staff to amend the draft ordinance number 23C-08, limit the proposal to amending the MICC section 19.04.050 for only the addition of a school use, and to set the second reading and adoption of ordinance number 23C-08 for June 6, 2023.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, seconded by Councilmember Andrew. Any discussion, Councilmember Jacobson?
Yes, there's several points that compel me to do this. Item number one would be, this is exactly what Herzl asked for in their docket request. And the second item is that it appears that we're partially amending the B zone insofar as it's applicable to a school, but not to service stations, restaurants, motels, decorating shops, public garages, and auto repair shops. And so I am reluctant to be partially amending something as we are soon going to be dealing with a comprehensive plan amendments, which may or may not affect this entire zone. So I think it's starting to partially deal with these in advance of our comprehensive plan completion 18 months from now is not a wise thing to do.
Okay, before I go to you, Councilmember Reynolds, City Clerk, did you capture that motion? I think it was emailed out.
I did. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Reynolds.
I'd just like to ask a question. I don't know if this is for Councilmember Jacobson or for staff, but I thought I had understood from the presentation that the reason these setback requirements were being proposed to be put in place was that they did exist on those other sorts of uses, but they needed to add something to make it apply to schools as well. Did I misunderstand that misunderstand that? Or could somebody put in a service station or a convenience store or whatever with no setbacks in the current rules?
The only prescribed setback in the B zone itself in the code is a setback from a public right of way. And I believe that's a 10-foot setback, and there may be a slightly larger setback, I think, for gas station pumps, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, Allison's nodding in agreement. So that's the only prescribed setback. The other, site design or features that would ensue for those other uses, some of which Councilmember Jacobson just referred to, would be through design review in another chapter of Title 19, where the Design Commission would review for screening, for location of parking and so forth on a site if a site was to develop or redevelop. And then so it would be with the Design Commission at that point. But in terms of prescribed setbacks, again, it's only that setback from the public right of way that's in the code currently for these properties.
That Design Commission review would still apply to a school in a B zone as well?
That's correct.
It would have essentially the same procedures as a gas station would or whatever. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, next we go, Councilmember Jacobson. Is that a new hand, old hand? Old hand, I'm guessing. Any other council questions? Councilmember Reynolds?
Just one quick question. What would be the pros and cons or implications of or possibilities of Herzl just combining their parcels together into one property? Does that would that be practical, and would that solve the interior lot line problem?
Right, wrong, or indifferent, the consolidation of those parcels would actually, as Allison correctly pointed out during her presentation, the two of the adjoining parcels anyway are split zoned, which then would have residential regulations prevailing. So if you were to combine all of the common ownership parcels into one, it would still then, it would become one large split zoned parcel, which would then be subject to residential regulations. So then what would happen there is not only would the permitted use of a school then move to a conditional use permit, again, right, wrong, or indifferent, but also the residential development standards would apply. So then we're back into standards that may already be exceeded by one consolidated parcel, such as gross floor area, other setbacks, lot coverage, and so forth that are part of the R zone regulations.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Yeah, question for Jeff Allison or Mr. Murphy. How would this, if we were to adopt Councilmember Jacobs' motion, what effect, if any, would this have on the internal lot line issue?
Well, we would be back to what's in the B zone currently, which again is that one prescribed setback from the public right of way. And then a proposal then would be subject to, again, going back to the design commission and design review process and the guidance that is set forth for commercial uses on Mercer Island. That would be put in front of the design commission, and they would work through that and come up with some sort of decision on it.
But just to be clear, this would not leave them with a 40-foot stretch that Allison, thank you.
No.
Okay, Councilmember Weinberg.
Yeah, question for Vice Chair Murphy. The proposal that's currently on the table here at the City Council would essentially undo the alternative B that was proposed by the Planning Commission, including a 45-foot setback from single-family property lines and a 30-foot setback from the right-of-way and a 15-foot setback from public parks. I was wondering if you could elaborate on some of the logic that was discussed back and forth at the Planning Commission and how those numbers were arrived at and what might be lost by not having those.
Well, the numbers are arrived at by overall looking at what made sense given the site. So whether there was a particular reason for a number or not, I can't tell you that. Most of the setbacks were considered consistent with the other setbacks for conditional uses for schools, but not necessarily replicating them given the size of this area.
Did I answer your question, Ted?
I have one follow-up question, if I may. Was this a unanimous vote of the Planning Commission?
I believe it was.
Yes, it was.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe I'll take a turn. I don't know if this is a question for Allison or Jeff, but you made some comments during the presentation about these provisions, this recommendation made it in alignment with the comprehensive plan. Does that mean that there are other uses in the B zone that are not in alignment with the comprehensive plan? Could you speak to that?
The comprehensive plan currently considers the commercial office and B zones together in one commercial land designation. And it says that schools are a secondary use to commercial office uses and should be allowed in commercial areas as such. It doesn't specify if, the B zone should have schools, but it just says in general, commercial areas could have schools as a secondary use. And so permitting this use in the B zone is consistent with that. There's no inconsistency that would need to be corrected in the comp plan.
So the discussion that touched on should the B zone persist and maybe a CO zone, rezone of the B zone is a solution that is more scalable, like that's around the comprehensive plan, talking about commercial zones, but not business zones. Right, so we're basically remodeling the bathroom here by doing the school, but are there setbacks that should be applied to motels? If you were looking at a B zone, would you kind of remodel that? Would you look at setbacks for a Starbucks or a restaurant?
I mean, I can say that the commercial office zone does have more substantial development regulations and standards than the B zone. B zone appears to be very basic, likely has not been amended since the 1960s when it was adopted. There's very few standards in it.
So Councilmember Jacobson's motion to just do what the applicant asked, allow the use, don't rejigger all of these setbacks, could be could be then made irrelevant by changing B zones to CO zones in a comprehensive plan update? You know, we could just use what's already there that's better to replace it.
I think that would be more of a rezoning and development code amendment. The comprehensive plan would already be consistent with combining them.
Okay, so
Just need a map amendment.
But maybe a different way, Mayor. I'll reframe your question into one that I can actually answer. So put a slightly different way, could many of our zoning districts in the development code use a modernization of the regulatory requirements? I would answer yes to that question.
Okay. And the B zone has by far the fewest number of undeveloped parcels. I think Allison said
there's one, so.
Yeah, I mean, you probably, if you start going zoning district by zoning district, I'm sure you would probably find just volume wise, other districts having, just a sheer real number of undeveloped, R zones, for example, but.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Councilmember Jacobson.
Part of my reason for making this motion is that we have very few parcels that are in the B zones, as was illustrated by Ms. Van Gorp's presentation. And it would seem to me that as we go down the road, that consideration of folding this into the B zone into the CO zone would be the simplest mechanism and would not harm any of the currently B zone kinds of properties. And it would allow the Hertzville to go forward with, its intention to get a school permitted, which I understand without anyone saying it, it's their intention to do. I think there's another important thing, and that is that it would answer what the applicant asked for without putting in effect conditions on it. And I think that's an important kind of thing. So those are among the reasons that I made the motion I made.
Okay, thank you. Council, any further discussion? All right, City Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Weinberg.
Aye.
Councilmember Weicker.
Aye.
Mayor Neese.
Aye.
Was that aye, Mayor Neese?
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Jacobson.
Aye.
Councilmember Androl.
Aye.
Councilmember Reynolds.
Nay.
And Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Very good. Motion passes. Thank you, Vice Chair, for coming tonight. Okay. Our next item of regular business is AB 6269, financial status update for the first quarter 2023 and budget amending ordinance, for which we welcome Matt Morning.
Thank you, Mayor. Please let me know when you can see my opening slide.
Got it.
Looks good.
Okay, all right. Well, good afternoon, Mayor Neese, City Council, and City Manager Bond. I'm Matt Mornick, your Finance Director. Joining us virtually is Luan Tuttle, the Deputy Finance Director, and Ben Schumacher, our Financial Analyst, here to help answer questions about the city's first quarter of 2023 financial status update. All right, let's dive in. This afternoon, I'm going to walk through 12 slides outlining key takeaways on the city's finances from January through March of this year. Much of what we are going to cover builds on the information we shared in April during the 2022 year-end financial update, which includes activity regarding revenues from the real estate excise tax and the Mercer Island thrift shop. I'm going to outline next steps along with staff's recommendation for this afternoon before opening it up for questions at the end of the presentation. This table is likely familiar, and it provides a high-level overview of the city's finances in the general fund and the utility funds. So from left to right, the 2023 amended budget is in the first column, which is the original adopted 2023 budget that has been updated based on the 2022 carry forwards the City Council authorized during the April 25th council meeting. The next two columns are the revenue and expenditure actuals from January through March for the prior and current year. And the final column compares the total percent of 2023 actuals as of March 31st relative to the amended budget. For the general fund, revenues and expenditures are tracking with budget expectations. Revenues are slightly below that 20% benchmark for the first quarter of the year because the city's primary revenue source, property tax, is largely receded in April and October. Still, revenues are healthy, and we're going to discuss more of this on the next slide. Expenditures are tracking on the higher side at the end of March, primarily due to costs associated with legal settlements and the filling of vacant positions. We're also seeing a corresponding increase in employee compensation costs, which are tied to the CPIW rate of inflation. Budget actuals in the utility funds have a little bit more variation, but is reasonable given this point in the year. Revenues are slightly higher than they were last year, which corresponds with the rate adjustments that went into effect January 1st. And capital project expenditures in the beginning of a fiscal year are traditionally low, given much of the capital work occurs late spring through early fall. Circling back to general fund revenues, sales tax revenues are up compared to the prior year. In the first quarter, there was a notable increase in sales tax revenues from the construction sector. As we discussed in April, sales tax revenues are tracking with the pace of inflation, which still remains high. Development service revenues are on track with a bump early in the year that is tied to the collection of deferred revenues with the culmination of permit projects that span multiple years. And the third revenue stream that is exceeding budget expectations is interest earnings. And that is predominantly due to the recent activity by the Federal Reserve to increase interest rates and how that has impacted interest earnings and in general, the economy. So I just want to highlight what's going on with interest earnings. This chart illustrates the true 30-day yield on the city's investments with the Washington State's local government investment pool from the period of March 2019 through March of 2023. So from left to right, you can see the earnings rate drop below 0.5% after May 2020 and remain there until March 2022. Then we see the LGIP's 30-day yield increase to 4.7% in March of this year, which represents a 4.5% increase over the past 12 months. This 4.55% jump in the LGIP 30-day yield is the largest percent change observed in recent memory. The next closest change in the 30-day yield in a 12-month period over the past 10 years was a 2.17% decrease between July 2019 through July 2020. So we're going to revisit our assumptions regarding interest earnings and the city's revenues in general during the mid-biennial budget process this fall. There are two other revenues outside the general fund I want to provide the city council with an update on, beginning with the revenues associated with the real estate excise tax, also known as REIT. As the council is aware, the revenues generated from the 0.5% tax on real estate transactions is the primary resource that supports the city's capital improvement program. The revenue is inherently volatile, as evident in the activity that we've observed over the past 2 years. So at a high level in 2021, the city experienced an all-time high in REIT revenues, and that was largely due to the total number of sales, including a handful of extraordinary sales. However, in 2022, total property sales reached a 13-year low. Excuse me. So this downward trend at the end of 2022 has continued into 2023. This table compares real estate activity on the island and the resulting REIT revenues from January through March for the past 3 calendar years. I want to bring to your attention the far right column. Although the total inventory of properties listed for sale during this period has increased, the number of properties that have sold and the corresponding REIT revenues has decreased, notably decreased. A key driver during this period has been the changes, as I mentioned earlier, to the federal funds rate set by the Federal Reserve and the corresponding impact on the borrowing costs for home loans. So staff will follow up with the City Council on potential impacts to the city's budget, the city's capital improvement program at the mid-biennial budget process, if not before. But for now, we're closely tracking REIT activity and we'll keep you informed as new information comes in. Shifting gears a bit, this slide provides a brief update on activity in the Mercer Island thrift shop. So this graphic, there's a lot going on, so we'll break it down. It illustrates the net profits for the first quarter for the past 4 years. So on the y-axis on the left is the thrift shop's net profit for the first quarter of each of the 4 years, which net profit is revenues earned less expenses, as illustrated by these green bars. And the x-axis indicates the fiscal year from 2020 through 2023. And the y-axis to the right tracks a metric that we call return on investment. It's the return on investment factor, which tells us how much revenue is generated for each dollar that the thrift shop spends. This is plotted by the dark blue line. So going back to the first quarter of 2020, immediately before the onset of the pandemic, Q1 net profits for the thrift shop were $114,000, and the ROI factor at that point was 1.48. You can see the pandemic's impact on the thrift shop activity in 2021 and for the better part of 2022 as efforts to rebuild the thrift shop's operations got underway. For the first quarter of fiscal year 2023, the ROI factor indicates that for every dollar that has been spent in the first quarter of this year, the thrift shop is making $1.45 in revenues. What's more, the thrift shop's net revenues, again, that green bar in Q1 of 23 is about $105,000, which is over $73,000 more than the same period in the prior year. So things are improving as rebuilding efforts continue at the thrift shop, and the staff team is confident that this upward trend will continue into 2023.
Got a question from Councilmember Reynolds?
Yes, Mr. Morta, can you go back to that prior slide? Thank you. My recollection had been that kind of in broad round numbers that pre-COVID, the thrift shop generally had about 2 million of revenue and 1 million of profit per year in round numbers. But I'm seeing here about 110 million of profit in the first quarter, which is decidedly below that level. So is my memory just faulty, or is it seasonal so that we could still, like if we looked at 2020 as a whole, would it have been close to 1 million?
I'd have to go back and look at the year in total numbers. We're looking at just first quarter activity, but yes, the revenue in the thrift shop does have a seasonality factor to it. I don't have that data in front of me at the moment, but these are our actual earnings and it's net profit we're looking at. We're not looking at necessarily revenues. We're looking at net profit. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, at some convenient time, doesn't have to be during the meeting. I would value a recap of what 2020 for the full year was. And if you have a forecast, what you expect full year to be this year, I'd like to know that too.
Okay, Councilmember Jacobson.
This may be out in speculation city for the finance director, but to what extent are our revenues impacted by inflation in the thrift shop? Do you have a feel for that?
I honestly don't. We've been just trying to track closely these two metrics and working with the thrift shop team and just working quarter to quarter to make sure we're hitting our revenue targets. So I have to believe that it is a underlying current that is impacting our revenues. But I would have to tap the thrift shop manager to speak to the pricing methodology that she's put in place since arriving and how that has compared to prior years.
Okay, that's fair enough, and I don't need to have that now, and I can talk to you off record here if that's actually even a useful thing to do. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Weinberg.
Yeah, remembering back to the beginning of the pandemic, we kind of all discovered it in late February, and then in early March, the lockdowns rolled out very rapidly. And I can't remember exactly when the thrift shop closed in Q1. I presume it was in Q1 of 2020. They didn't stay open throughout the month of March. So I'm wondering whether the revenue in Q1 of 2020 was already impacted by the pandemic, and whether having a fifth bar on this chart on the left side for Q1 of 2019 might show a taller mountain yet to climb, but that maybe the 2020 was already somewhat impacted.
I believe thrift shop operations in Q1 in 2020 were marginally impacted by the pandemic, the onset of the pandemic. I believe operations shut down in April, but if the period from 2018 to 2020 was the period in which thrift shop overall revenues peaked. So that was those were their banner years relative to the past 10 years of thrift shop activity. So if it would benefit the council, and I can incorporate additional prior fiscal years into the analysis.
We'll see. Councilmember Reynolds.
Thank you to Councilmember Weinberg, who effectively reminded me I was confused on my years. It's 2019 would be the full year I would like to see. So if you could do that as well as first quarter, that would be very helpful.
And so maybe just as a bone to you, Director Mornick, the ROI factor kind of normalizes these things, right? Because it says for every input, you're getting an amount of output. And so if 2020 is a normal quarter, maybe a banner quarter, that's about the best we can hope for. Our ROI, if I'm not reading this incorrectly, is pretty darn close, right?
That's a good takeaway from this, Mayor Neese. What we're really trying to do is normalize all of the earnings, get away from expenditures, get away from revenues, and start talking about net profits. And so we're not yet back to the numbers that we saw in 2018 through 2020 at the thrift shop. I don't know if we'll ever be, but we have new management, and the team is working really well. And I can tell that they're excited about the work that they're doing, and that they're putting new measures in place. And so we're going to get to observe that activity over the next full calendar year and see what it results in, tracking it with these metrics.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great chart. Thanks for putting that together.
Sure thing. Any other questions on this chart?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay, we'll continue. Next week is an exciting week. It's the City Council's planning session. During that time, we're going to walk through the guidance that's outlined in the City Council's financial management policies and seek the Council's direction regarding strategic uses of the 2022 year-end surplus and the remaining federal stimulus dollars from the American Rescue Plan Act. The mid-biennial budget workshops are scheduled this fall, in which we will update the revenue forecast and seek council's direction to make budget adjustments at that point in time. I'm going to wrap up with staff's recommendation for tonight, which is to adopt ordinance number 23-06, amending the 2023-2024 biennial budget. And I'll conclude here and stop my screen share for any additional questions.
Okay, Council, any remaining questions? I'm not seeing any. May I have a motion to adopt ordinance number 23-06, amending the 2023-2024 biennial budget.
So moved.
Okay, Councilor Mercer, seconded by Councilor Reynolds. Any discussion? No. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Neese, was that moved by Councilmember Weicker?
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Jacobson?
Aye.
Councilmember Weicker?
Aye.
Councilmember Androl?
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum?
Aye.
Councilmember Weinberg?
Aye.
Mayor Neese?
Aye.
And Councilmember Reynolds.
Aye.
Was that aye, Councilmember Reynolds?
Yes, aye.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Very good. Thank you. Motion passes. We now move to other business in the planning schedule. We welcome back City Manager Jesse Baum.
All right, quick look ahead, council, and for the community members that might be joining us, if you didn't hear my city manager's report today, I provided an update on the city hall closure. Just a reminder, looking out through your July city council meetings, we are planning for the city council to be on Zoom. We will continue to notice the community center room that I'm sitting in this evening as the available facility should anybody wish to join us to watch the meeting or provide public comment. Council, a reminder, you have a mid-year planning session, then speaking of Zoom, a week from today, and the start time is 1 o'clock, if I'm not mistaken, 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock on May 23rd. Your next council meeting after that is June 6th, and I did want to call your attention to an agenda item we added. We will have a joint meeting with the utility board to kick off your June 6th meeting, and Seattle Public Utilities will be attending that meeting to provide us an overview of the water supply emergency that occurred several weeks ago, and to identify the work they're doing and after action planning. And I think I will leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Very good. Thank you. Council members, any upcoming absences to report? Councilor Weicker.
So July 18th, I need to be late by about 45 minutes.
Okay.
Unless y'all want to move the meeting back to 5:30 or 6.
We'll excuse your lateness. How about that?
Perfect.
All right. Councilmember reports. Councilmember Androl, any report?
I don't have anything to report, but have we formally moved to move the July 4th meeting to July 5th?
Well, we don't need to because it's by policy allowed to happen.
Okay, we just do it.
But just
and notice it. Okay, great.
Good policy work does that.
Well, thank you for that.
Councilmember Jacobson.
Nothing to report.
Okay. Tomorrow there's a meeting of the GMPC, the caucus, and the combined body. There's a robust discussion about the UGA, the 1994 UGA, and the countywide planning policies, having also references to the UGA without the 1994 line. This has a huge impact on the 4-to-1 program. And the 4-to-1 program is a program where you take 4 acres and permanently preserve it as open space to take 1 acre and make it part of the UGA. And so it's commonly referred to as the process of establishing the Emerald Ring, which kind of confines the urban growth area, which we live in. So being an island, this is something that has no material impact on us, but our friends in Snoqualmie and North Bend, which are UGA islands and have growth allocations and housing that they need to find a place to put, are obviously troubled by the ambiguity of the 1994 UGA reference and then other references to the UGA. And so we're going to arm wrestle over this all afternoon tomorrow and see if we can't find the right place to land on that. So tune in for riveting urban growth discussion at the GMPC tomorrow. Councilmember Reynolds.
Yeah, just a quick report out on the Parks and Rec Commission meeting, which happened a couple of weeks ago now. We received a report from the King County Libraries, which was very effective, I think, on their plans for kind of slowly starting to reopen. And then we also they approved the 30% design for the Aubrey Davis Trail Safety Improvement Project.
Very good. Thank you for that. And Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Another report. I unfortunately missed the last PIC meeting. I appreciate Councilor Berg, who was our alternate, who attended. So I will yield my time to him, I guess, to explain that. But I unfortunately also had to miss the PTA council meeting on Wednesday as well. So I caught up, but nothing to report.
Okay, Councilmember Weicker.
Nothing to report.
Okay, and Councilmember Weinberg.
Yep. So as Councilmember Rosenbaum alluded, the Sound Cities Association held its monthly Public Issues Committee, or PIC, meeting on May the 10th. And during the session, they reviewed the latest update to the King County Regional Homelessness Authority's 5-year plan. The current plan is greatly simplified from the original plan. It, instead of 8 goals, it has 1 goal, albeit with 26 words. And instead of 70 metrics, they have 6 metrics, although they are tracking the other data in the background. It's not like the data is going away. It's just their 6 primary metrics. Instead of asking for over $1 billion to solve homelessness, their current plan is focusing on what they can do with the funding that they have received. And the full details of their 5-year plan are now available on the King County Regional Homelessness Authority's website. The PIC also discussed the Blake decision, and we heard from various cities that have either passed or are thinking of passing their own ordinances should the legislature fail to come up with a statewide solution in a special session. And we also heard a report from the Hazardous Waste Program. Key takeaway there was that they are not planning on increasing their surcharges this year for solid waste fees, as the 2022 revenues exceeded expenditures, and they have a healthy account balance. And that's what I have to report.
Thank you. Okay, in terms of upcoming announcements, the City Council mid-year planning session is on May 23, 2023. So May 23rd, 2023 from 1 to 5 p.m. And the next hybrid meeting of the City Council is scheduled for Tuesday, June 6, 2023 at 5 p.m. I wanted to ask the city manager before I move on to this next bit to adjourn is, we have an executive session after this, is that right?
Yes.
So in my script, I don't have the language, and I also don't have the agenda that has the RCW. So I'm going to need somebody to read us into the exec session.
I can read you into exec session, Mr. Mayor.
That would be
My apologies for that.
No worries.
Next, excuse me, the City Council will go into executive session to discuss with legal counsel pending or potential litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.110, paren 1, close paren I, close paren. And there'll be an executive session for approximately 1 hour.
Okay, no action will be taken. Time is now 6:20 p.m. As a reminder, council, please stay seated until city staff's terminated the broadcast. Thanks, everyone.